welcome to this week's episode of Around Kansas. I'm Michelle Martin, your co-host. Deb is off on Santa Fe Trail business this week. She'll be joining us again soon. Today, I want to talk a little bit about the history of Fort Osage, across the line in Missouri, because this September, you have an opportunity to not only travel, but learn some history at a very special event. But Fort Osage, if you're not familiar, was founded in 1808, and it was under the direction of Commander William Clark of the famed Lewis and Clark expedition. And as that land that was the Louisiana Purchase began to open up, and as the American government looked to develop the region, they believed that establishing good relations with the native nations in the region was very important. And one way to do that was to establish a series of what were known as factory forts. Factory forts were places where good quality, low cost goods would be traded with the native nations in the hopes of creating alliances and good relationships. And Fort Osage was the perfect place for that. The fort was located atop a bluff that overlooked the Missouri River. And this was important because in 1808, folks, we still have the Spanish, the French, and the British trying to make inroads into what is the American West. They tried to establish their own relationships with the native nations. So having that factory fort there was important to the young U.S. nation. So the factory fort was supposed to trade those goods with native nations and establish those good relationships. Now they're called factory forts because you had a factor who actually ran the post and bought and sold goods on behalf of their employer. And in this case, that would be the United States government. This is actually comes out of an English tradition. The factor would have been the individual who ran the fort. And the first factor at Fort Osage was none other than George Sibley. And he served as the factor from 1808 to 1822. Now, he was not alone there. The United States military looked at the factory forts as great locations to have small complements of troops to be able to keep an eye on the French, the Spanish, and the British, but also to keep peace between traders, fur trappers, and others, and native nations. And so at the fort, there was a company of about 81 men, officers and enlisted men from the 1st U.S. Infantry that were assigned to Fort Osage. And as I said, this September, you can learn more about Fort Osage and its history and its very important connections to the Santa Fe Trail and the Lewis and Clark Trail. On September 4th and 5th of this month, they will have the Santa Fe Trail 200th commemoration of Fort Osage National Historic Landmark. And we will provide you with more details in a web link. But you will be able to interact with the American Mountain Men Association reenactors and the Arrow Rock Stock and Trade Company reenactors. And they're going to be there all day portraying traders, trappers, mountain men. And you'll be able to see what life was like in that very early time period at Fort Osage as we saw trapping, trading, and the creation of relationships between those individuals and native nations in the West. So get on out and enjoy that history at Fort Osage. Folks, it's one of my favorite, and I know it's one of Deb's favorite historic locations too. We'll be right back with our wildlife segment after a word from our sponsors.
This is Deb Goodrich inviting you to Rendezvous in Council Grove, September 17th and 18th. The weekend features a Mountain Men Rendezvous, an antique wagon show, and the Voices of the Wind People pageant in the newly remodeled amphitheater on the Neosho River Walk. That antique wagon show is going to be spectacular, as is every event that weekend. Visit SantaFeTrail200.com for details.
In 1821, a trade route was opened from Missouri in the United States across prairies and mountains to Mexico. In 2021, we will mark 200 years of epic conflicts and grand adventures, larger-than-life personalities, and sweeping landscapes. Join us on an historic journey. The Santa Fe Trail lives on.
Find us on social media or santafetrail.org.
Welcome to the Western Kansas Wildlife Travel Center, right here in my hometown of Oakley, Kansas. We're the front door of Western Kansas, located on 3 main highways, I-70, US 83, and US 40. And all those roads lead to history, beautiful scenery, and adventure, no matter which direction you go. We now have an IHOP. That brand that you've trusted up and down the road in all your travels is staffed with local folks, real people, just like you and me, and we're waiting on you to join us. So for fun, adventure, fuel up, fuel your body, and let's have some fun.
Welcome back to Around Kansas. I'm Michelle Martin. Deb has the week off. Behind me, you see a very familiar avian face, and that is the crow. I don't know about you, but in particular, as we get to fall and we begin to think of fall and harvest and Halloween, of course, I do think of crows and ravens. When I was growing up in Michigan, my mother had a particular affinity for crows and ravens. As a matter of fact, any crow or raven that came to eat at our bird feeder was immediately named Edgar or Annabelle. Today, in this wildlife segment, we're going to look at the Kansas crow.
One of my favorite birds is the crow. And the crow always reminded me of a cowboy walking around. You know, the way he's kind of got that little swagger going on. And they are such smart creatures, and they're so interesting, and they sometimes get kind of lumped in with other birds, undeservedly so. So let's take a look. And crow season is going on right now. Doggone it. It really hurts my heart to see crows killed and doves, but I'm not going to argue with the hunters. But he is a very interesting little critter. So let's take a look at the crow.
Crows are incredible birds. They can count, solve puzzles, and perform other complex tasks. They can mimic sounds, including human voices. Back in the Virginia hills where I come from, the neighbors who ran a still many years ago had a pet crow that warned them when the revenuers were close to the still. Writing for the website Quora, Claire Jordan explained the difference between crows and ravens. Crows and ravens are closely related and are both corvids, said Claire, exceptionally intelligent, omnivorous birds with the problem-solving ability of a human 3- or 4-year-old and a harsh, croaking cry. The raven is about the size of a small chicken, and crows usually about the size of a pigeon. Ravens can be quite predatory and will kill and partially eat lambs. Ravens usually live in small family groups. Crows in large flocks. Claire added, the blackbird is a much smaller songbird, a type of thrush. It eats seeds and insects, has a beautiful song, and as far as I know, not particularly bright. Crows tend to be monogamous, mating for life, and waiting to choose a mate. A family of crows can be multi-generational, just like humans. They are affectionate with one another. Leslie the bird nerd has all kinds of reasons for us to like crows and has a great video on the subject. She mentions the fact that crows hold an inquest over their dead, and if they determine the cause of death was a bird of prey, they will gang up and go after it. I have personally seen them going after much larger birds, like hawks and owls. Leslie also cites research of crows eating the corn borer, a moth larva that can be especially destructive to crops. Stories of the crow fill the pages of folklore and are surrounded by mystery and sometimes gloom and doom. But take some time to know this brilliant bird, and if you must shoot, watch out for the crow family. that may come after you in retaliation.
Howdy, I'm Seth Hayes, and welcome to my hometown, from then to now. Council Grove has a rich history as deep as the prairie tallgrass. Spend the day visiting 25 historic sites, or explore the unique shops and restaurants, or mosey out of town along the Santa Fe Trail. You all visit my hometown, Council Grove, in the heart of the Flint Hills.
Okay, looks like it's time for our tour. Welcome to the Fort Wallace Museum. Here at the museum, you're going to find some really interesting stuff, like our replica stagecoach from the Butterfield Overland Dispatch. We've got facades from the fort buildings. We've got an 1870s flag. There's a plesiosaur that was discovered locally. We've got the Ray pump organ collection. We're a little bitty place with a great big story, and we'd love to have you.
Welcome back to Around Kansas. I'm Michelle Martin. Well, today, for our fun segment, I want to share with you some of my favorite places to have coffee in Kansas. I don't know about all of you, but especially as fall begins to unfold and we have those crisper temperatures, I really love a hot cup of coffee in the morning or sometimes in the evening. So I'm a decaf girl for the most part. And I know in the coffee world that can be tantamount to heresy, but I really love my coffee and I love to be able to drink it morning, noon, and night. And when I lived in Kansas and in all of my travels in Kansas, I have a few of my favorite places to get local coffee. Well, first of all, I have to start in my adopted Kansas hometown of Fort Scott. And I can tell you, when I lived in Fort Scott, had Common Ground been in existence, had they been a downtown business when I lived in Fort Scott, I would have been there every day, multiple times a day. And when I returned to Kansas and I spend time in Fort Scott, Common Ground is one of my favorite places. When you go in, the atmosphere is relaxed, the staff are friendly and wonderful, and you're able to get your favorite, your cappuccinos, your lattes, Americanos, or a great drip. But they pair it with some amazing baked goods. They do wonderful sandwiches and they have fantastic salads. They also have local art available for sale in the shop, but they also are a place for poetry readings, author events, and they do live music. I love the fact they've also had an area where they have games tables set up. So it really becomes a community focal point. And I think that's what a great coffee shop does. And Common Ground in Fort Scott does it well. Now, if you're in Topeka, the capital of Kansas, you cannot go wrong when you visit the Classic Bean. You know, Deb and I, no matter what book project we worked on together, we spent hours and hours at the Classic Bean. And it is our favorite place in Topeka to have coffee, primarily because they have the most incredible coffee selection. Again, you can get those Americanos, lattes, cappuccinos, those mochas, those breves. You can get just straight espresso shots. You get wonderful baked goods and foods, but it is again a place where people know one another. You get that sense of community and camaraderie at Classic Bean in Topeka. So make sure you check them out. Now, if you're heading west along I-70, don't forget to stop off in Salina, because books and coffee go really well together, and you've got to stop at Astr Books and Coffee. It is a beautiful little bookshop with a fantastic coffee bar and coffee shop. So you're able to indulge two great passions at once. And I know a lot of our viewers love to read as much as they love their coffee. So make sure to stop in Salina and stop in at Ad Astra Books and Coffee and tell them Deb and Michelle And Noelle, Deb's daughter, tell them we sent you. Now, when I'm in far western Kansas, aside from the occasional Starbucks, I really never would have thought I would find a really amazing coffee shop. And then I went to Wallace and I went to the Memory Bank. And our good friend Don Allman has combined antiques and coffee. Now, folks, that is an amazing pairing, if you ask me. Antiques and coffee. Well, you can find it in Wallace in a bank building that Dawn and her husband have lovingly restored. And she will brew up an Americano, a cappuccino, a latte, a mocha, some drip. And as a matter of fact, when I visit Wallace, I actually bring some of my favorite decaf grind with me, and she will use that to make my Americanos. Make sure that if you're in Western Kansas, you get off of I-70, go down and visit Wallace, go to the Fort Wallace Museum, but stop in at the Memory Bank and tell Dawn that Deb and Michelle sent you, because she makes a fantastic Americano. Now, if you're down in South Central Kansas and you're going through Wichita, you cannot go through Wichita without stopping at Watermark Books and Café. Again, not only do we have coffee and great baked goods and food items, but we've got books. Books, food, coffee, it's everything you could want in one stop. Watermark is probably, of all of the independent coffee shops and booksellers in Kansas, is my favorite. Watermark has been an institution in Wichita for years. And what I love is the fact they love to put authors in connection with their readers. I have been to numerous book signings and book events there. As a matter of fact, the last book signing I attended at Watermark was for my good friend Jenna Blum, as she was signing her book Grand Central, a collection of essays and actually of novellas about World War II historical fiction. But she had been there previously to promote her book, The Storm Chasers. So folks, go visit Watermark Books and Cafe in Wichita. Find some great Kansas and regional authors, have a wonderful cup of coffee, a great pastry, and tell them Michelle sent you. I hope you enjoyed this quick coffee tour around Kansas, and we will see you next week.